Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Well, welcome to the Ethics Experts. I've been so excited to get you on. How's it going for you today?
It's going great. So I'm in Montana, and you know that we haven't had, just like in Colorado and like in this area of the Rocky Mountains, we haven't had any snow. It's been quite dry. So we are just having the first snow falling this morning.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
January and February, it was really dry. So yeah, it's been crazy. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just dive right in here. What do you say?
Okay, I'm ready.
So I always like to talk about kind of what you were like as a kid and how you ended up getting into this space. So tell me a little bit about your background, what you were like when you were younger, and, you know, because I can usually kind of trace some of those, foundational moments or some of those foundational experiences that you had that kind of end up directing us into this path, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I guess so. I grew up in Colombia, South America, hence my accent. And I moved to the States as an adult when I was 17. So like after I graduated from high school. And I was supposed to be here for 6 months. And then go back and start college and whatnot. But I ended up staying. I ended up getting married early on. Then, got divorced and whatnot. But I stayed here. We came to the States many, many times growing up for vacation. And so I kind of knew that I really wanted to just, be here. So that worked out pretty well on my end. Growing up in Colombia, it was great. The education there is a little better than what I hear here. I guess the school system is a little different here in the U.S. But again, I can't really say much about it because I don't have any kids, so I don't deal with with that too much. But I hear that from my friends and obviously my sisters and nephews and nieces. But in Colombia, it was great. So my parents actually were very foundational for kind of like, integrity, kind of that ethical background. My dad was, they're still alive. They live in Orlando, Florida now, but and retired. But my dad was the young lawyer. He then was a political figure, worked for the state, but my dad was a people person. So working in the community, I remember he will pick us up from school, and then he was always on the go, right? And then we'll have to go to like very, very undeserved neighborhoods. And I would see people just kind of running over my dad's car, seeing the excitement of, people in that neighborhood because he was bringing either like food or items, donations, things like that. He did that pretty often, but I just remember this one guy, no shoes and shorts, dirty face, an adult, not a kid, running over, super excited with tears on his eyes. So my dad was he's always been very humble, a people person. And my mom was in HR, human resources, and she was kind of a little bit more involved also on the payroll side. More of a quiet person. I think now my mom, as she's getting older, she's much more talkative, much more social. So it's really fun to see how things change, right? My mom also in Colombia, obviously completely different culture. I don't know, Nick, what your background is. I think you said your parents were Cuban, right? But yeah, in the U.S., when you go to a restaurant, it's so different. So my mom used to be, I don't know, it's in South America, I guess, and this probably changed, but this is when I was very little. My mom used to clap to call the waitress or the waiter. And
I tried that recently, and I got a terrible service after that. Yeah.
And she did that first year when they had moved to the US, and I'm like, Mom, no, you don't do that. So that was just really funny and interesting. Now my mom is, and also, she wear suits and heels and, makeup, the whole thing. Now my mom barely has any dressy clothing. We have to tell mom, put some makeup, right? Like she has just completely changed from
She's
her
American now, you know?
Yeah, I guess. 40s to now in her 70s. She's a very selfless person, but it's just interesting to see that that evolution of your parents. Yeah.
So you move here when you're, practically an adult. You ended up staying. What were some of the major sort of chapters that ended up getting you into this compliance space?
I got into compliance. Well, my background, so I had a master's in health information management, and then I was doing my internships, like clinical work for a couple hospitals. I think Mercy Hospital was one of them down in Miami, and then I got a few jobs working with medical societies, working more on that, like the EMR integration implementation. I mean, that was, at that time where like the EMR adoption was huge, and HIPAA in 1996 too. So like in the early 2000s, there was a lot of that in healthcare, but I wanted to go back to school. And I remember that this is like in 2014, 15. And I read this article, and it was a physician who wanted to transition from medical work to administration. And I saw like regulatory compliance, kind of that was like keywords that article had. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then I learned about that master's of jurisprudence in health law, in compliance. And I was at the time living in Wisconsin. And so this master's was at the Loyola University in Chicago. And it was like a hybrid, so mostly online. And again, this is at the time where like there wasn't a lot of online, opportunities. And I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. I can definitely do it. I can take the train. It only requires me to go 3 times a year for workshops. The workshops are usually on the weekend, so I can still work. And so I did. That was like in the beginning of the year, enrolled myself. I got in and I started that fall. And that was for me, pivotal, obviously, key for me to kind of get into compliance. I forgot his name, but he still works. He's a professor there at Loyola University, Chicago, but he was invited at the SCCE. He was I think Brian is his name, but he was given the award at the SCCE national conference this past fall. Yeah. And I wasn't able to say hello. Like he had just walked away too soon, but he was one of my professors. And he's just so passionate about compliance, and compliance to me was just basically everything that very similar to like how the way I grew up is like, this is just a very meaningful career profession, right? It's just everything that we do is for the better of, right, everyone, the company, the organization, your team members. And so, yeah, it's just a very so satisfying, in my opinion.
How soon as you started to explore compliance did those kinds of elements that you just talked about start to resonate with you? Like how quickly did you start to see, okay, this is really my home?
It took, I would say maybe about a year when I got my because I finished that master's, right? And I was still working for an organization who manages multiple medical societies, like specialty societies. And so I wasn't really doing compliance specifically there. I was doing more of a quality work, health policy, government relations, working with people at the Hill, going a lot to DC, but still a lot of regulatory and keeping up with what the changes, and regulations and everything. But it was when I got my very first job as a compliance manager or compliance analyst. I can't even remember the title, but that was my very first job. And it was here in Montana about, just 3 years ago. But we had, within the first month, the company had hired a consultant to do a compliance program assessment. And so I learned very quickly, like the first 6 months, literally about everything about, compliance. I mean, it's one thing to understand what compliance and ethics is, but I wasn't really, and obviously through, this school in Loyola, kind of obviously I understood a little bit, but I wasn't familiar with the framework, right? Like 7 basic elements, where did the elements came from? What was the reason, right? This was developed or implemented. And so all those pieces I learned those first 6 months when I got that job. And I was hooked. I was like, I'm on board. This is awesome.
And what was it about it that hooked you? Is it the sort of clarity of it? Is the sort of the purposeful work of it? Is it kind of all those things?
It's meaningful. It's meaningful. It's not a requirement that you do this because it's requirement. It's not. It's just that human piece of it. Yeah. Like this is people should be applying this in their everyday. So it was just very clear to me. Like it's like, yeah, this is common sense. This is what humans should be, behaving and thinking about, and parents should be actually thinking about their kids to have that kind of ethical framework. So for me, it was immediate. But again, because my parents are very at like high level of integrity. My parents, I mean, just one of those, individuals that they're just special human beings.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about this recent chapter that you've been in. There's been some interesting sort of changes that you've been going through, that your organization has been going through. In our pre-call, you talked a lot about how this integration of these two different organizations has been both a challenge and an opportunity to preserve and enhance the compliance, program. And I think in our pre-call, you talked, a lot of what you were talking about, I thought would really resonate with our listeners, because a lot of compliance, there's this sort of idealized picture that, many of us are pursuing and that many of us get, energy from. All those things that you just talked about, the integrity of it, the human element of it, the quality component of it, and so forth. Talk to us a little bit about this chapter and, what you've learned and, how you're kind of applying your frameworks and your energy into kind of elevating the combined programs.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And I also been extremely lucky to be, to have had the opportunity in the last, I guess, pre-pandemic, right before the pandemic, with really incredible compliance officers, and obviously seeing some of the changes. So I was working I'm in Montana, and so there are two kind of major healthcare systems, and so I was working for one of them. And then now they've been kind of integrating, unifying since like 2023. So it's been very interesting to see the compliance department coming together, even though we still have different, right, EMR systems, different vendor systems, different accounting, right, separate HRs, all that stuff. And that's still happening. But our team, our compliance officers, they partnered right away, right, from the very beginning. And they were one of the first kind of departments to start working together, regardless of not having all the tools, right? And so it's like, okay, how can we do this? We started with the compliance risk assessment. And so we were using both, right, the same survey, even though it was kind of separate forms, right? One for, the system A and then system B, right? But we will then come together, and then I will get together with both of the compliance officers and review all the results and go through, right, the scoring and the classification, and then have other team members participate in that process too, because we have all of our team members participate when we do kind of like the follow-up interviews to gather more information after you do that risk assessment, right? So that's just one piece, but then you kind of follow up with those key leaders or anybody else. In fact, now maybe we saw, wow, it's the first time this person's participating. That's great. Well, let's use this opportunity to introduce yourself, right? Introduce compliance and ethics. And then even if they don't have anything new to say, it's really just that point to see faces, to make the connection, and to start building the relationship. So that's really critical. Those post-assessment, I guess, interviews, I call them just really follow-ups. And then we also keep them super short. So like 15-minute phone call. We're not going to set up another hour to talk to that person. Like, tell me about, top risk areas. What's, your concern in the area, or we just make it really informal and keeping it short. And so that's how we started working together. And then coming kind of some ongoing meetings as well, right? Now we're in the process. I mean, it's been now almost, in September will be 3 years. But we are, the teams work together. So like, let's say in our one side, right, of the organization, let's say our privacy leader now is working with the privacy leader there. And now we're in the process of like combining and trying to systemize, right, under the new organization, our compliance, privacy, policies. So it's a long process, and you know how that is when you have to kind of write unit systemize policies, then you have to bring all the other subject matter experts. Mm-hmm. And then also just using that as an opportunity to continue to build the relationships across, right, both organizations. So it's all opportunities. And so you have to stay positive. It's like everything is an opportunity.
That's right. Yeah. I love that framework, or I love that kind of that perspective, because it is all an opportunity. It's an opportunity to improve. It's an opportunity to push your, program forward. I want to go back to the follow-up calls with participants in the risk assessment. You said you kept those short. You keep those kind of informal. What's your kind of stated, what's your agenda on that kind of a call? Are you just trying to kind of find out some more to get some more context or some color around their answers? Are you also trying to kind of shoehorn, maybe that's the wrong term, but shoehorn in some kind of a connection point so that you are, kind of bringing some, kind of humanizing the compliance function? Like how do you think about, you're talking about these are all opportunities, and this is the thing that really stuck out to me in our pre-call, this vantage point you have, or this perspective you had, that there's just kind of opportunities everywhere as you're combining, companies, as you're combining, teams, and things like that. Like there are all these opportunities. And so I kind of want to spend some time talking through how you identify those opportunities and how you take advantage of those opportunities. So let's start with this first one, with these like risk assessment follow-ups.
Risk assessment interviews. Yes. So it's all of the above, Nick, but you do have to have consistency. So for instance, because we're trying to have the whole team participate in the process, like in this interview. So it's not just the compliance. So right now I have 2 compliance officers. So they have the co-chief compliance officer role. But it's not just the chief compliance officer doing the interviews. It's everyone in the team. And so we select. So if it's going to be, hundreds, we can interview all of them, right? But then strategically we go as a group and we're like, okay, who are key people to interview here? So we just basically check. Okay,
and how are you picking if they're key people? Just based on position, based on their level of interaction? Like, how are you assessing that?
All the things. So based obviously on, leadership roles, key departments, people that, right, it was the first time participating, maybe new leaders, right, or just new staff member. We also try to look at their department versus the risk area that they are reporting. So for instance, let's say if you have your human resources, your VP of human resources reporting billing issues. Wow, that's interesting. I want to see what kind of issues he's dealing with, right? As opposed to having your coding biller, right, or revenue cycle leader reporting about, my billing is reimbursement is a high, risk area for me. So picking those things, those odd, right, people who maybe work in, also people, let's say, who have in a specialty area. So an example here, I work in healthcare, but this can obviously apply to any industry. If I see a person, let's say in imaging, and is telling us that they have an issue in, billing specifically, then their billing issues is going to be very different than someone who works in, I don't know, other department, right? Like operations or, any other department. So we also try to do follow up with those individuals to get the specific examples, right, that they might be having. Conflict of interest, obviously, too. It can be a conflict of interest can be very different from someone who work right on the floor, like operations, versus someone who's in working for like contracting and vendor management. So we are looking at all those things, right? And then also we kind of have a template. It's a form that we use. It is a voluntary form where we have this kind of 5 questions that we want to ask the individual, the participant during those follow-up interviews, to make sure that we're like, okay, this is kind of like, you do your introduction, obviously, but you have to sometimes remind them what they are reporting to, because sometimes it takes like 3 or 4 months after we are, doing the post-assessment. So we remind them what the top risk area they reported or voiced. Then we give them the opportunity to, share anything else at that time. And then we go into like, give me a specific examples, right? Like, what is it? Give me a specific examples. Then we go into like the root cause, right? Like, what are some of the key challenges, right? That's impeding you, or like that you're having trouble to kind of overcome, right? That issue, that risk in your area. And then obviously you're looking at 2 things right there: root causes and the internal controls. And then at the end, once we kind of wrap up the conversation, then I like to then kind of look at my notes. Again, I'm not sharing this with the leader. Like, this is just for me as the interviewer to just kind of gather, make sure that I'm getting the information, and I'm trying to capture what's the root cause and what are the internal controls that we're lacking based on that risk. And then we have a little kind of that says, okay, do we think this risk, is it already managed? Is there already an effort, right, that's ongoing? Are there existing policies that's going to address it, maybe just this education? Or do we need to include this in our compliance plans, like auditing or monitoring plan, right, or a compliance education plan? And then we gather all that intel from everybody. And then in our risk register, we have kind of like a different section of the feedback, or the interview feedback, right? And then we review as a group all of those things that everyone gathered. And then we come out with like the actions. Okay, what are the items that we need to include in our auditing and monitoring plan or education? And then what are the items that we already know are already being addressed, that they are efforts undergoing?
You've talked about these 2 teams that have really kind of come together, and I think that that's kind of a rarity. Usually, or often, let's say, when there are 2 sort of like teams during a combination like you've gone through, there's usually this kind of political thing. There's vying for power. There is, it's not smooth, and I'm sure there's been bumps along the road, but the picture that you've painted is that these 2 teams kind of coming together have been some of the first teams to start integrating. And it seems like there's a lot more of a collaborative spirit between these teams, a kind of focus on trying to get to the best answer and, get to the right outcome, as opposed to kind of the typical contentious relationship that, like I said, often sprouts up when there's this kind of a combination. What would you kind of attribute that to, and what have you kind of learned along the way? What do you think the root of that kind of collaborative spirit is, and what are some of the things that you've been able to say, company A is really doing this well, we should adopt that, or company B is really doing that well, that should be sort of the main pillar of, this particular aspect of our program?
You nailed it. The approach is it's the best of both worlds,
Yeah.
So
I mean, a lot of people say
going,
that during an M&A transaction. Oh, we're going to get the best of both worlds, but then it really comes down to the execution, and the execution
exactly.
often is like so wrought with the human sort of ego, all of that sort of noise that ends up preventing, the combination from achieving that potential best of both worlds that, is talked
Yeah.
about before the transaction happens,
So right. So leadership obviously is key, right? But also the two, right, chief compliance officer are, I mean, that's been instrumental that they decided we're going to work together, right? Then everybody else on the team is like, we're going to work together regardless of, right, being, especially in the beginning, obviously not so much after 2.5 years of trying to integrate the whole system, but it takes, right, the tone at the top. So the two co-chief compliance officers were very clear in the beginning that we are going to work together. And then, we started with like going through that inventory of like all the tools that we have. And then we're still kind of like, for instance, the other system also now joined, like now they're also using the Ethico hotline. And we also use your exit interview service there too, third party interview. But so it started just with that, right? And then kind of looking at all the auditing and monitoring that we can do again together as a system. So we're just kind of going through the whole integration projects, the policy, right? Integration, it takes a lot of time. I mean, it's
Totally.
been over a year and a half, and I still have a handful of policies out of like, I don't know, 30 policies, compliance only. This is not even including privacy policies. And so it just takes a lot of time. But again, it was from the very beginning. We're like, we're going to integrate anything that we can that's under our control, right?
Mm-hmm.
So things that obviously, the two of them don't have control, we just have to wait. And it's like, well, what can we do? How can we collaborate? Committees, for instance, committees that they have, right, in the other organization, then sometimes one of us sit on that committee. Vice versa. We're inviting also some key team members, right, in the organization to join to participate in some of our existing committees. So it's and introducing them too. So like everybody now knows, right, the other compliance officer at the other organization because she participates on our side, and likewise. So it's like, well, you have to be welcoming. Right? It's not just like, yeah, sure, come and join. You have access to our committees and information, but you have to make that effort of like introducing, reintroducing, mentioning, hey, by the way, for those new in this committee, here is, whatever the name, making sure that everybody gets the opportunity to know who or she is. So always being intentional, right? Every time you have an opportunity, and so I feel like that's just the approach. And again, more in the compliance department, we are culture, so we understand very well. We are trained about how to bring people together, right? How to work together. When we are in meetings, or at least I'm gonna speak for myself, but if I'm in meetings where like you feel the pressure, you feel that then no, say something funny. Break the ice with something positive. Sometimes I even say a word in Spanish just to kind of be like, oh, or some people say, oh, I know that you speak Spanish. And I'm like, well, you hear my accent. Clearly, I'm from America. But, trying to find a way to kind of break, that negativism. So I feel like it's being an effort from everyone. So it's great that we have good chief compliance officers and leaders, but it really takes all of us to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And we remind ourselves every time. So we do like, what do we do to remind ourselves? Every time we have a team meeting, which we do it weekly, we start with a core value and we rotate. And so for instance, right, we go in order. And so let's say next week will be me, then I'll pick one of our core values, and then you have to do a quick little mini presentation about that core value. And it could be a poem, it could be a video you heard, it could be a drawing, it could be, anything. And so It's really.
Why is that important? What does that do, you think? Keeping that value rotation front and center, rotating the values, rotating it across the different folks on the team. Why is that important? And what is the benefit of that,
Seeing perspectives, people might see things differently. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves just to, like, in general, let's say, for instance, one of our core values is to be kind. It's interesting to see when we, everyone kind of provides an example, and kindness could be seen differently. Kindness is not the same as being nice, right? Kindness, an action is an act, not being nice. And so it's just like you learn, you get to know your team members more.
I've never heard that before. Kindness is an act. Talk to me about that difference, because I think a lot of people conflate or confuse nice and kind as kind of the same thing.
So being kind is the act. So you have to be intentional about that. And sometimes when you're kind doesn't mean you're going to be the nicest. Sometimes, Nick, if I'm going to tell you something that you might not want to hear, you might get upset.
Not right now, please.
Right? Yeah. And so that's the thing. Nice, it's just you're doing it because, it's like,
nice is, you're saying kind of nice is fake, and kindness is really an action. It's an intentionality. There's a sort of a heart behind it versus that sort of mask.
Yes.
Interesting.
And there was a video. So it was Simon Sinek, that's how you say his last name. And then I forgot this host. I forgot he's Australian, but I forgot his name. But they were, there were a conference, and there was this, video of their session. And that was one of the things that they mentioned. You have to look for it. But they got into a deep conversation over an hour of talking about the difference between being kind and being nice.
Really?
Yes, and that was very interesting. If I found it, I will send it to you. But I was like, wow, that's incredible how these two simple terms are so different. So culture is like that. Culture, seems easy, but it's not. It has different definitions. I know that there was one, I'm a follower of, like, Simon Sinek, but he said, and I have this fresh because recently, since we do that weekly, the core values, and so I have this one in my notes where he defined culture as like values plus behaviors. And so the behavior is the verb, right? So for instance, honesty, the value honesty, what is the verb for that? What's the behavior of honesty? The truth, right? It's the same. Another one was innovation. So value of innovation. What's innovation? What's the verb? What's the action? Finding a new way, right? To solve a problem.
And I guess in doing that, I mean, how can you express a value without some kind of an action other than but through a lecture, which is only sort of academic, it's only sort of cerebral. The manifestation of that value is, to your point, only going to be through actions and interactions and collisions of people, inside the organization. So that's a pretty smart frame. Because like the values can always, it's so easy for the values to turn into like dead words on the wall. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Every website has a values page, and there's probably similar value, there's probably a pretty big overlap between like, most of the core values that are out there. Like, I think there was a study, it's probably a little bit old now, but something like 70% of public companies had the word integrity in their values. Okay. Mm-hmm. So like, does that value have value to the extent it's not actually like animated or being animated inside the organization, i.e. through efforts, to your point? Right.
One of the things that Petra Lencioni, right, this book author coach, right, and I read already 3 of his books. So I have 3 more, but.
Which ones did you read?
I read, the 5 dysfunctions.
Yeah.
Right?
5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yes. And then the ideal team player.
Great one.
I love that one. It's so simple, but wow, was that impactful. One of the things that he basically in all his books, right, is that, for instance, that example you provided about integrity is like, no, when you are developing, when like he's working, consulting and working with organizations about how do you build your mission, what is that statement, what core values, like you have to be specific. Integrity is too general.
It's too vague.
So,
yeah.
It's right. It's like you have to choose things that are specific to this organization, also to the industry, right?
Yeah, and they should be things that separate you, that define you, that are not,
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So don't choose, right. So when he starts working with an organization and he says this very generic mission statements and core values, is like, this is why things are not working. And then he goes into the nitty gritty. And so, some of his books, he gives you the step by step of things that you can do in your organization to reevaluate that.
Well, there's such an opportunity. Well, you said this, a couple of minutes ago. You said we are culture. You're saying that compliance is culture, and I absolutely agree with that. And it's just interesting how sometimes we lose sight of the power of taking that identity on. That is a separator between, you want to talk about values or you want to talk about purpose. If you look at different departments within your organization, of course, culture is everyone's, but it's kind of more ours than like, I don't know, the janitorial department, for example. Like they're not like tasked with like driving culture forward. And it's easy, I think, to lose sight of it because we live in a very, we live in a fast-paced world. We are often in this sort of reactionary mode in compliance in general because there's so much stuff flying around and we're managing risks and so forth. It's often easy to like lose sight of, okay, our values are kind of good to go. I have to put out this fire. How do you maintain, you or your kind of combined teams, how do you maintain that sort of balance to like this important but non-urgent, pillar of your organization, which is culture, against the kind of day-to-day fires being put out, you know what I'm saying? The execution of your, project plan or your program plan for the year. How do you keep the right, eyes on that really important North Star?
I think that we know what the function of the compliance and ethics department is. So we know that we can, we have their boundaries, right? So we know that we're here to make the recommendations, right? But sometimes we're not the ultimate decision. So we have to remind ourselves that is the function. We do have to collaborate and with all the key areas across the organization, but sometimes it's just that's so much we can do. So you do what you can under your control and your function. So like if under compliance, and ethics, we're here to let's say make recommendations to the best of our ability for the organization to do the best right thing. But then we gotta give it to, let's say, legal. If it's something that legal now has to kind of make the last decision, then okay, well now it's really up to legal really just to make that final decision based on what we already, shared with you, our recommendations. Same thing with operations. Sometimes it's really up to that operational leader to make that final decision and make, things, make that, that, I don't know, implementation or change. So we can control, we know that we only have certain limits, right? We can tell the CEO, we can tell that operational leader, right, to do certain things. All we can do is advise them, right? We're giving that recommendation, reminding them, the policies of the consequences, the pros and cons, and then they have to. So we have to trust, which is part of compliance and ethics. We have to trust the leader or that person, right, to make that decision after they have received all the information, right? So making that informed decision. And so that's the thing. Otherwise you're going to be frustrated all day long. So each of us in our team, we remind ourselves of that sometimes. But if someone in the team is voicing an issue with a specific operational leader, then it's well, you did all you could, right? I think that don't kill yourself. Don't worry too much. Don't,
Don't beat yourself up. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So it's just, yeah.
Well, that's so hard though sometimes, because sometimes the answer is so clear and you sometimes can, or at least me, sometimes I'm not really clear in my own mind where my sphere of influence or control is in reality. It's probably a lot smaller than I think it is. And when I'm like kind of living outside of that actual, sphere of control, let's say, it's easy to get frustrated when things don't go the way that I want.
The way that you want it, right? But you're a parent, right? And sometimes you tell your kids best thing you know, and then they end up doing something else. Sometimes so people learn the hard way. Your kids, we're all kids. Sometimes we have to learn the hard way. So
yeah, that's true. That's hard advice to take sometimes. I mean, for something like, the weather is obviously way outside of my control. I can't really, it's so insane to get upset by the weather. Like, oh, it's raining today. I'm upset by that. Like, that's a childish, idiotic sort of like, thing to be upset about. But how different is that from me being upset that, the advice I gave somebody else, coworker, whatever, is not taken to the extent I can't actually force it to the extent I can't actually control it. It's kind of similar. It's closer to the weather than it is to, controlling my own attitude, which is kind of inside the sphere of my control,
Exactly. That's the only control we have, controlling our emotions and, staying calm, staying truth. So much you can do, but not letting those things get to you and getting too frustrated. All you have to remember yourself is that you did everything you could within your power, your knowledge, right? And also when it comes to obviously at work, like making sure that you have everything documented in the case that things do go wrong. If it's going to come back to you, and obviously not to be pointing fingers or anything, be like, I told you, but like, this is the recommendation that we made. Here is the documentation, all the emails, the summary report, the strategic document that we even provided. So documentation, I think, will be key for those battles that you're not going to win. Then document everything as much as you can. Yeah.
I just want to kind of touch on this a little bit more, but, you said compliance is culture, and it seems like there was a high level of cultural health between these two teams that have come together over the last couple of years. And you've attributed that to, you had great leaders on both sides. Both of those compliance officers seem to be in a very sort of collaborative mode. Each of the sort of team members across this sort of combined team seem to be taking a genuine effort to integrate and kind of get the best of both worlds. And that is a great, to the extent that compliance is culture, which again, I do agree with that. That is such an opportunity to kind of demonstrate to the rest of the organization who doesn't have that as culture, as like on their mandate or on their kind of priority list, for their job to the same sort of level of clarity that a compliance department does. It's a great example to those other departments on what the integration should be. Have you seen some of that that influence, or have you seen some of that some impact of this example that you've set?
Absolutely. You were just I was just going to say the first group of leaders, people that noticed that our collaboration were the boards.
They did.
Yes, because both of our chief compliance officer, right? They present together to all the boards. So now the boards, before it was like boards on one side, boards on the other. Now the boards have now been kind of systemized. Yeah. But even before they were kind of systemized, the two of them were presenting together to the boards when they were providing compliance updates or the annual compliance plan report, right? And they were the first ones to say, wow, we applaud you.
Wow.
We can see your collaboration. And for us, and then obviously they share that with the rest of the team, right? Because we're not all going to be going to all the board meetings. So we're like, wow, that's awesome. Like also, and that's something that they do really well as well. They share the credit. They're sharing all the positive areas. Like they're like, wow, I heard, how, the board is so exciting to see compliance working together. Wow, that should be a good example for other departments to do the same. So that was kind of like, a way that we know that what we're doing is being noticed. Yeah, but that was very cool to see that the boards were one of the first group that noticed that collaboration from the very beginning.
Well, I think they notice it probably because it's happening, but they also have an eye for it because they know it's important. At that board level, there's a big strategic decision to combine two organizations, and when you're at that board level, you've probably kind of seen it all. You've seen it all before. Mm-hmm. You've seen deals go really well. You've seen deals go really poorly. And so when you've planted seeds or you've made a bet like that, you're looking for kind of some kind of early indications that like, okay, this is going how we hoped it would. And seeing that mm-hmm. level of collaboration is sort of indicative of at least the potential for like, continued integration across the across the sort of new combined organization.
Exactly. Yeah. And obviously, the communication. So I feel like both leaders, both chief compliance officers have been able to communicate, our efforts, our integration, like the collaboration. Every time that there's like that we complete a project, right, systemizing something, everyone is going to know. We're sharing that with everyone and all the key committees and leaders. So sometimes we have to reward ourselves that way, making sure that those things, get noticed.
So I want to kind of shift as we're getting toward the end here into your sort of advice or your perspective on how our industry can maybe embody some of the things that you're talking about, or how more of us can implement some of the things that matter most to really move our programs forward. I've talked about how a lot of people feel stuck. A lot of people feel like they're pushing a string up a hill or pushing a rock up a hill, and they're not getting the endorsement from leadership that they need, or, all the frustrations that come with work. Like there's brambles and thistles in our work, no matter where we work, you know what I mean? So what kind of perspective or advice would you give to sort of the broader industry on how to not get caught up in the day-to-day frustrations, and rather find those opportunities that are all around us to drive impact, improve our culture, reduce our risk, and all those kinds of things?
Baby steps, right? It's the little things every day or every week. So don't think, especially when it comes to integration, I feel like don't think too much on the long term, right? Which is, yes, you also have to do that. But in order to make those changes, especially when, like in my case, if we got all the support, right? So that's just like on the other side. But if you're on the other negative side, right, where like you don't have, there's lack of buy-in and support, the teams maybe are not getting along pretty well, then the little things every week, right, or every month, every time you find an opportunity, like, oh, there is this little project now, or maybe this audit, or maybe this monitoring activity, I'm going to have these two people, right, like work together. So the small wins, because that's how you build up to have a big win. So don't get too frustrated, don't push yourself too much, right? It's really just take advantage of those small little things, the small wins. Every little thing is an opportunity. So just having that shift like in your mind, you have to be positive that way. Because again, that's just how mind works. You focus too much on the negative and you continue to voice the negativism, then yes, you are going to be on that. Like everything is going to go downhill. And right. So you have to, it's kind of like, for me, I'm all about the energy and the universe, voice, all the things. You got to put it out in the universe. So focus on the positive, focus on the opportunities, voice, right? Say it aloud, the positive things too. So that will be, I don't know, the only advice that I can think of. It has to be, I mean, I cannot imagine feeling stuck that way, not having the support, having conflicting, right, team members not getting along. I mean, managing people is difficult. It's just really difficult to manage, to deal with human beings in general. So it's just don't kill yourself. Just take it easy, one day at a time. Baby steps.
Your life really is what you fixate on. It's so crazy how two people can go through a similar thing and have totally different lives after it, where one is looking for those opportunities, looking for the silver lining, and the other lets that negativity kind of creep in, and that just colors everything that you see. I mean, it's really a wild, it's a wild vulnerability that humans have, but it's also like a wild opportunity that we have to like shift it, because you can always take your glasses off and clean them. You can always start to try to train yourself to find the positive, you know?
Mm-hmm. Another thing too, I'm, also been kind of reading some of this, ethical, integrity related books, leadership, investing on yourself kind of books. One thing that I've noticed too is about, especially like people, right, who are in the negative side, doesn't have the support, right, is having a challenging time, then find the one, even if it's outside compliance, right, then find that other operational leader that thinks like you, right? That has that mentality, that shares your values, that shares the same goals within the organization, but also, also personal goals. That way you start dealing little by little, then find those little operational leaders, and then you're going to see how, as you start building on those relationships, focusing on the opportunities, then you're going to start seeing the change. It's not going to happen overnight, but I noticed that that's been a recurring, all these different authors, different books, but they kind of mention that, make that point that sometimes you just have to find your people. That's basically what this is.
And you can always find your people. There's always your people out there. You can always find them.
That's the thing. Basically, what they're trying to say is that you're not alone there on that rocky road. Find the people, find the other rescuers.
The other guardians, yeah.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
And there's so much contagion potential. Like, people's attitudes are really like the flu. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're sitting next to somebody and they have a whole pile of, tissues on their desk because they have a flu, you're probably going to catch it. And if you're surrounding yourself with a bunch of people that have sort of the same mental flu, it's very, very difficult to like keep your guard up enough to not get sort of affected by that. We're all sort of sponges, we're sponges to energies and attitudes and perspectives and things like that. And so it's really important that we guard our mind and, again, train ourselves to like find, train ourselves to say at least, or train ourselves to find the right perspective or find those opportunities. But what's crazy is my friend Mel told me this story, and I may have said it before somewhere, but it's crazy how some people are really lucky and some people are really like unlucky. And it's not like they're wired a different way. It really comes down to their different perspective. And she told this story about this study where they asked everybody, do you consider yourself lucky? And some people said yes, and some people said no. And then the next stage of the test, have you heard this thing?
No.
This is crazy. The next stage of the test, they gave everybody a magazine, and they said, okay, a magazine or a newspaper or something. And they're like, all right, you have, 15 minutes to go through this newspaper and count all of the, all the pictures of cars in the magazine. Okay. So long story short, the unlucky people took on average, it took those people on average 12 minutes to find the 47 cars in the magazine. The lucky people, most all of them, guess how long it took them? Like a minute. It took them only a minute to come up with the 47 cars that were in the magazine. You know why? Because on the first page of the magazine, on the bottom, it had a little box that said, there are 47 cars in the magazine. You can stop looking now. And so I'm just saying, disproportionately, the people that consider themselves unlucky, they didn't even see that opportunity. They didn't even see that thing. And yet all the lucky people were not blind to it. Exactly. They weren't blind to it. They saw it and they were able to see it. So like, that's such an interesting study to me. It stuck with me since she told me about it. And it's so true. The friends of yours who are positive, they probably have much better lives. They probably are not unhappy all the time. They can see opportunities in everything. The people that are lucky, they see opportunities that other people literally are not seeing. They're literally blind to it. And what's cool though, is that you can train yourself to do that. Like if I asked you how many red cars did you see today, you'd say, I don't know. If I said, okay, if you just bought a red car, you're going to start seeing red cars everywhere because like your mind is kind of like implicitly trained to start to kind of notice those things. And so the mind is such a powerful tool that we can really use to, you can reshape it, you can train
I
yourself to see those
love
red
that
cars.
story. Well, here's another one that you can add to your bio. Maybe you already know this one too, or maybe I heard it in one of your podcasts. Who knows? But it's the psychologist, and again, I don't remember the name, the book, the research, and I don't even know what year. But he did something similar with people about self kind of confidence. But he drew. And people didn't know, but he selected a few people to go and talk to people out there on the streets. But a few of those people, he has gonna draw like a cut, a face, right? On their faces.
Like a facial scar.
Exactly, right? Have you heard of this one?
I may have.
Yeah, and then it was the same thing. The people who came, who had that, right? Because they thought, so they did it to all of them. Right? And they're like, okay, now that you all have this really ugly scar on your face, go try to talk to people. And then you're going to come back and you're going to tell me about your experience. What he didn't tell a few of those people is that he had already removed the scar.
Yes.
So he painted it, but he removed it before they went out, but they didn't know, right? Because they were not given a mirror to see themselves, right? To go out. And they came out with this like negative, this like feeling like, no, like they feel like, people were looking at them weird, biased.
Everyone was staring at me.
Yeah. And then obviously, then he shows them the camera, like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Your face.
You create it. You create that thing. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. It's just, it's such an opportunity and it's such a threat. Like if you're not guarding it, if you're not putting screens on your windows, who knows what's going to crawl into your mind? You know what I'm saying? Exactly. You have to have the right screens up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I love that one about the carbon. I use that for another podcast. I'll remember.
Yeah. Very good. All right. So as we're wrapping up, I always love to end with this question. If you could go back in time and find a young Ximena, what's a piece of advice you wish you got earlier?
So many. Honestly, I didn't think of this question before. A lot of things, but I would say be patient. Be patient. I think I was one of those teenagers that I was the know-it-all. I was a difficult one. I was difficult with my parents, and they were angels, but I was just a difficult one. And super independent. And so I feel like, and then I wanted to just live my life hard, quickly, getting old quickly, like, make the money, get the job, everything. And now it's just about, not about all the things that we do, right? That we think that you have to like check the box and do all these things. Now it's really about the quality of your life, right? You don't need to accomplish all these crazy goals. It's really about the everyday. So for me, it's about just, if I knew in my early 20s, I would say, be patient, enjoy the everyday, don't work too hard, I feel like I missed a lot of opportunities because I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't looking, I wasn't in the present, especially professionally. I feel like I did really well living my present time when I was in my young 20s. I had the best life, especially because I was in Miami, living la vida loca, but professionally, I wasn't there. Professionally, I was just, I feel like now it's just finding that balance and just being present and taking the opportunities when they, present themselves. But I think I was a little too hard on myself early on. So
I love it. Great advice. Great episode. Really inspiring. It was really fun to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. An honor to speak with you, Nick.
Wow. Okay. What a way to end it.